Hello and welcome to Sit Down with U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen. My name is Kimberley Haas. Thank you so much for watching today's program, and thank you so much, Senator, for joining us today.
Great to be with you again.
I know, I'm so happy to see you. I haven't seen you in about a year.
That's right, but you've been very busy because you had all the elections and everything that you were dealing with, so it's nice to have that over and have a chance to come back and talk about what's going on.
I know, it's so good to see you. Like I was saying before the show, it's so nice to get back into the routine where we can talk about the different issues that are happening and the different things that are being done to solve problems in Washington. And of course, you're one of those champions for problem solving in your position, and we're grateful to have you. Maybe you could introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit about what you've been working on.
Well, we're ready to start a new Congress, and I hope to continue to focus on many of the things that I've been working on over the last 4 years. So primary focus has been on jobs and the economy and what policies can we put in place to create good jobs. And of course, small business is one of the areas that I've been working hard on. It's a foundation for our economy, and we know that 2 out of every 3 new jobs are going to be created by small businesses. I'm on the Small Business Committee in the Senate, and so helping those businesses get into international markets is one of my priorities. One of my favorite statistics is that 95% of markets are outside of the United States, but only 1% of small and medium-sized businesses are doing business outside of the U.S. So making sure that businesses can access those international markets is really critical for their growth. One of the other areas that I'm really focused on that, again, I think is about how do we create jobs, and that's energy. I've spent the last 4 years serving on the Energy Committee in the Senate, and my particular focus is energy efficiency. I've worked on legislation with Rob Portman, who's a Republican from Ohio, so it's bipartisan. I think the more bipartisan we can be, the better we can get things done. And it would be a comprehensive effort to encourage energy efficiency. I just came from Veterans Building here in Derry, where they've done a number of energy efficiency projects to upgrade that building and make it more comfortable for all of the people who use it. And it's really energy efficiency, the demand side, is our first fuel. It makes us more energy secure. We're less dependent on foreign oil. It's better for the environment, less pollution. So really trying to encourage better use of the energy that we do use is really important. And again, it's a place where there are jobs that are going to be created. Here in New Hampshire, we've got a lot of businesses that are working in the energy efficiency area, so it's great for job creation. Of course, looking at innovation and research and how do we encourage that, because that's where a lot of the jobs are going to be created. I was really pleased that the Small Business Innovation Research Program finally got reauthorized last year. It's something that New Hampshire companies have really benefited from. And of course, another area that's very important as we think about how do we grow the economy is the education, and how do we get more young people graduating in the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math. Earlier today, I started out at Woodbury School in Salem. It's a middle school, and I visited a class where the teacher had been chosen by the Smithsonian as one of 3 in the country to present at the Smithsonian based on research that she had done, teacher on a ship last year. So to see the effort that's going on in our classroom and how we translate that into graduates who are going to go in and provide the skilled workforce of the future is really important. And that was Michelle Brustelon's class, so she's done a great job.
Thank you for mentioning her name. It's always nice that we get the chance to recognize the teachers that are creating the leaders of the future. And we all agree that education is so important. But of course, as we build our economy, as we create more jobs, energy efficiency and what we can do to create better methods to getting energy and utilizing our energy is, of course, very, very important. Now, right now, as we sit down together today, New Hampshire is making great strides in a lot of different areas, but one of the things that we're most proud of, and something I'd like to talk about first off the bat, is the fact that we have an all-female delegation.
We made history.
Right now, we're history makers, so maybe you could give me your perspective on that.
Well, it's very exciting, and it's been interesting to me to see the reaction as I've been outside of New Hampshire, both in-state, actually, because I think people have been very pleased that that was the outcome of the elections, but also outside when I say, you know, I'm from New Hampshire where we elected the first all-female congressional delegation. It usually generates applause in the audience, and I think people are excited because it is a difference from what we've seen in so many states and for so much of our history. And, you know, as women, we have different experiences than men, and we bring those experiences to what we do, and it's important to have that voice at the table when we make decisions.
Now, do you think the voters of New Hampshire sent a particular message by voting in all women, or do you think it's really just about the issues and the person that's best representing them?
I really do think it's the latter. You know, we talk about how exciting it is to have this all-female delegation and to have Maggie Hassan, a woman governor. But I really do think voters made up their minds, not based on gender, but based on the ideas that were presented, the positions that people had on issues, their experience. And that's the way it ought to be. You know, voters should be making decisions based on the ideas that are presented to them and what people are going to do, what they have done, as opposed to whether they're men or women.
Exactly. Do you think that some of this helps to play into the controversy surrounding President Obama's cabinet selections? Do you think that this helps fuel the fire at all?
Well, you know, as I've said, I was disappointed to see that the president didn't have more women in his first round of cabinet nominations. I hope he will change that as he looks at the other positions he has to fill, because we are losing some of the women who have been prominent in the president's cabinet. So what I've said is I hope he follows New Hampshire's lead.
Great, and I'm so glad to hear that. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but you serve on the Senate's Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees. Do you have a role, and what will your role be in the confirmation process for cabinet nominees?
I will have a role. Everybody on the committee does. The Foreign Relations Committee will hear the nomination of John Kerry, who used to be chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. So there will be an opportunity to question him on how his views about foreign policy may mirror Hillary Clinton's or may be different. Of course, as Secretary of State, he's going to carry out the policies of this administration and the president. And the same is true of Chuck Hagel. He's the nominee for Secretary of Defense, and he will be questioned by the Armed Services Committee, which I sit on. And so I expect there will be a lot of tough questions for him as well. He and John Kerry are both former senators, so they know how the Senate operates, and I expect they understand how the confirmation process will work.
Yeah, and do you have any particular questions that you're thinking of for either of them? Are you willing to share?
Well, certainly. One of what I've said about Senator Hagel, and we've had an initial phone conversation where I asked him, one of my questions is how he would implement the Shaheen Amendment, which was an amendment that I introduced to the Defense Authorization Bill that passed. I'm very proud that it passed. But what it would do is rectify what has been an inequity for women serving in our military who, if they're victims of rape or incest, they have not been able to access abortions through their federal health care coverage. They're the only group in the federal system who has been denied that access. Even women in federal prison are able to get an abortion in cases of rape and incest. And this seemed to me to be wrong, and we were able to change that as part of the bill. And so I know that Senator Hagel does not support abortion, which I understand, but I want to know how he's going to implement this provision because he will be the person in charge. One of the other issues that I think is very important as we look at our modern military is how we're going to address the issue of sexual assault in the military. Right now, women make up almost 15% of the people serving in uniform around the world for the United States. And yet, there is still an environment in too much of the military that allows for sexual assault to go on without any repercussions or accountability. I think that needs to be addressed, and we need to do a better job. Certainly it's something I think the leadership of the military recognizes, but I don't think that has translated down through the whole culture, and we need to see how that's going to be addressed. One of the other things that Senator Hagel has questioned about, and I want to hear his answers, are around sanctions for Iran. He has opposed unilateral sanctions, so I want to hear him talk about his reason for opposing unilateral. He's supported multilateral sanctions, so international sanctions, which is what we have right now in place for Iran. So I'm anxious to hear his questions on that, and also on Israel. There have been some questions raised about his support for Israel, and I want to hear how he answers those as well.
I know you've mentioned some of those things in previous interviews, but it's really great for our audience at home here that watches Derry Community Television and the other audience that watches our other PEG access stations to hear firsthand how you feel about things and some of the questions that you might bring forward. Let's talk a little bit more.
Let me just say before we leave Senator Hagel, one of the things that I think is important about his nomination is that he would be the first enlisted man to serve as Secretary of Defense. And I think he brings that understanding of how the men and women on the front lines of our military feel, what they're dealing with, and I think that's a very important perspective to have, and something that I've heard from veterans is important.
Oh yes. Oh yes, it's very, very important, but we are facing a complex world and military operations are changing. Like you said, Absolutely. More and more women are enlisted in the military serving us overseas, so we have to be upfront and honest about some of the issues that go along with it. And that's why I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the Shaheen Amendment. How did that come about? When was it signed into law?
It was signed into law right before Christmas. And it's something that we had been working on really for a couple of years. I attempted to introduce it in the last Defense Authorization Bill last year. Unfortunately, because it was done not in committee, but after the bill already got to the floor, it was ruled as not germane to the bill. This year, we started earlier, we got it introduced in the committee. It had strong bipartisan support. Ranking Member John McCain supported it in committee, as did several other Republicans, and so I thought that was very important. And when it got to the Committee of Conference, it had the support going in of 3 out of 4 of the leadership of the Committee of Conference. So the ranking member in the House and both the chair and the ranking member in the Senate all supported it. And I think there are a couple of reasons for the success of the amendment. One is the process and the way that worked, getting buy-in from members of the committees going into the process. But one big reason that I think it was successful had to do with the retired military folks who worked on it. We had a number of retired generals and other people who had served, both men and women, who said, this is not fair. It's not the way we should be treating our young women who are serving. And they were very helpful, very outspoken, really worked hard with members of the Senate and the House to get support for the amendment.
And you've had many legislative accomplishments in 2012. Maybe you'd like to review some more of those as well.
Well, one other area that I talked about earlier that I've really worked on has been the energy efficiency legislation. Rob Portman and I were able to get some of the provisions of our bill through this last year. In fact, it was quite an experience for me. We were the last people on the floor of the Senate at about 3 a.m., the last day of the session in September before we went home for the campaign. And we passed some of the provisions of the bill by what's called unanimous consent. So that means you don't have to have an actual vote on it because nobody has objected to what we were doing. And then the House was able to take up those provisions, put it on another bill that dealt with some appliance standards that made appliances more efficient and pass it. So we were very pleased to get those first provisions done. We have a lot more work to do, but that was very important. And we've had some other very good news for New Hampshire on some issues that I've been working on. The new tankers for the Air Force. We just learned that Pease is one of 5 bases in the country that has been designated as potential to have the new 46A tankers located there. Senator Ayotte and I have both been working on this, and that's very good news for keeping our tanker task force and keeping our active duty and National Guard working out of Pease. So I think was very pleased that that got done. Another issue that we've worked on has to do with our veterans again, our National Guard, the Deployment Cycle Support Program, which provides assistance to families and guards who are being deployed. And we've been able to get funding for that for another year, which again is good news. That's a program that Easter SEALs and the Department of Health and Human Services and our National Guard all work together to support veterans or Guard members and their families who are deploying. So we've had a number of successes that I'm very proud of. Obviously a lot more work to be done, not the least of which is how we're going to deal with our debt and deficits in this country. I think that's one of the most critical issues that as we think about how do we get our economy moving again, how do we get businesses who are concerned about what's going to happen with taxes, with raising the debt ceiling, with spending, how do we get them to get their money off the sidelines and start investing in, again, in equipment and job creation. And as I talk to business people around the state, that's one of the biggest concerns they have. It's the uncertainty about what's going to happen with that issue. So I think we need to get our fiscal house in order, and that would go a long way towards moving this economy.
What are some of the ideas that are coming to the forefront when you talk to those business leaders? What are they saying to you?
You know, they're concerned about the size of the debt, which is understandable. But one of the things that I've been struck by is that many of them say, you know, we don't necessarily have a magic formula or something that we want you to do. We just want you to deal with it, so it provides some certainty for us. And I think that's what we've got to do. There are a number of different ways to address this. I think we've got to look at the entire budget. We've got to take a comprehensive view so that we look at domestic spending, at defense spending, at mandatory programs, and at the revenue side. We've made some change on the revenue side. We've made some change on the spending side back in August of 2011 when we passed the Budget Control Act, which was, people will remember that was quite a fight.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we did was to cut spending by about little over $1 trillion, and we said we're going to cut another $1.2 trillion. So we have begun to address the spending side, and we've got more to do.
Yeah, I'm just curious to hear what they're saying to you, because it seems like there's always that uncertainty. You know, the businesses were uncertain before the election. Businesses were uncertain because of the fiscal cliff. So, you know, hopefully they're coming to the table with some ideas to make them feel a little bit more secure. So, like you said, can start investing in our economy again.
Well, one of the initiatives that Judd Gregg has been very involved in that I think is very helpful is an effort called Fix the Debt. And it's businesses that have gotten together to urge Congress and support members of Congress in agreeing that we need to do something about this issue and to make some of the hard decisions to get it done. So I think that has been a group of business people who are very helpful to the debate.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that they're voicing their opinions, that you know, the people on your level are working with them and listening to them as well. Speaking of, you know, listening to our constituents and what they have to say, I know gun control has been a huge issue and a very, very difficult issue for members of Congress to deal with. What are people in New Hampshire telling you when you speak to them about gun control and what they'd like to see happen after the Sandy Hook tragedy?
Well, as you say, the events in Newtown and that tragedy have made, I think, people in New Hampshire and across the country very concerned about gun violence and how we address that. The President, and based on the Vice President's task force recommendations, is making a number of recommendations to Congress. Some things he's talking about acting on his own. I haven't had a chance to fully look at those, but I do think we need a comprehensive approach to how we deal with gun violence. You know, I believe in the Second Amendment. I think it's been important to New Hampshire, and I know that it's something that voters in New Hampshire care about. But we've got to look at how we address this violence and the people who are getting hurt as the result. The fact that we could have someone who never should have had access to a gun go into Sandy Hook and really just mow down those children. That's horrible. I can't imagine anybody looking at that thinking that we can let that stand. We've got to look at how we address it. I think a comprehensive approach is best. So we look at mental health issues, background checks. How do we keep people who should never have guns from getting them? We need to look at our existing laws, and we need to look at those military-style weapons and how we keep those out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
Exactly, and it's all about protecting ourselves and our children, keeping our communities safe.
Absolutely.
Which is the first role of government, of course. So not to put a damper on everything, because everything's been going so well for you, and I know I'm really excited to have you here, like I said at the beginning of this show. What are some of your plans for 2013? What are you going to do moving forward?
Well, as I said, one of the pieces of legislation that we're going to continue to work on, Rob Portman and I, is the energy efficiency legislation. We plan to reintroduce that. We're going to make some changes, but I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to move that forward. I'm going to sit on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. That's a new position for me. I will be giving up energy, sadly, but going on to appropriations, which hopefully will be a way to provide some additional help to people in New Hampshire and initiatives in New Hampshire. So I'm looking forward to that and to learning that process. You know, Judd Gregg was on the Appropriations Committee for a number of years, and he was able to be very helpful to New Hampshire. So I'm hoping that I can pick up that mantra and continue to be helpful. Also looking at the legislation that I've worked on with Senator Isaacson from Georgia on biennial budgeting. Again, as we look at how we deal with the debt and deficits, I think we've got to look at the process that we have in place in Washington. And one of the challenges is that we're always trying to get a budget in place without doing the kind of oversight that is required. And I think the biennial budgeting allows us to do more of that oversight. So we'll be working on that again, and also looking at healthcare as we implement healthcare in this country, looking at the things that are working and the things that need to be modified. And we'll continue to work on STEM legislation. I talked about that earlier, the science, engineering, technology, and math. Very important to our jobs that are being created in the future, and I've had legislation that really builds on the first robotics competition, Dean Kamen's great program that now is in almost every state in the country and many countries around the world. It provides a great model to get young people excited about those subjects in a way sometimes that classroom learning doesn't. So it gets them into situations where they've got mentors and they can see what career opportunities might exist in those fields. So a lot to work on, but a very exciting new Congress.
Oh yeah, and like we said before this show, there's always work to be done.
Absolutely.
You're always there willing to do it. So we really appreciate your work on our behalf.
Thank you.
In Washington, and we look forward to seeing you again here on our show.
I look forward to it. It's an honor to be able to represent New Hampshire.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody at home for watching today's program. We certainly appreciate your viewership. Once again, my name is Kimberley Haas. Have a great day.